Hi everyone, thank you so much for your patience and understanding. We're going to finish off last week's discussion on semantics and vocabulary. You may recall from the readings that one of the components of effective vocabulary instruction is including direct instruction. With direct instruction, teachers specifically and deliberately choose words to teach and then provide explicit instruction in that vocabulary. The first question that teachers have to answer is deciding which words should be taught. You'll recall from the readings that there are a number of criteria that teachers can use in deciding which words should be taught. One is that words should be critical for understanding the text or the content. In other words, looking at words from content area reading or from narratives that are meaningful and important that you might not be able to determine from the context, but may actually contribute a great deal to context. Another group of words that students should be taught are words that they'll encounter often. So they're functionally important words, words that come up again and again, such as analyze or predict or compare, contrast. You want children to be able to understand those words so they'll be able to use those words when they come up. A third strategy is selecting words that are particularly useful for learning a vocabulary learning strategy. So in other words, morphological analysis or structural analysis, using prefixes, suffixes, bases, or roots to help children understand the relationships between words and give them the skills to be able to try and figure out the meanings of unfamiliar words by applying the morphological knowledge that they have. In addition to figuring out which words should be taught, you also have to keep in mind that for direct instruction, you need to be selective because kids can really only master about 8 to 10 new words each week. That is 8 to 10 words that are thoroughly taught throughout the week. More words can be defined briefly when they're encountered, so it's not that you ignore all other vocabulary, but you have target words that you want children to master by the end of the week. When we talk about vocabulary instruction, we talk about different tiers of words. The tiers of words are different categories of words, and you can see here that there are 3 tiers. The first tier are basic words that most children know before they even start school. So these are words such as clock or cold or happy, common words that probably won't need direct instruction, but you'd like to probe the children and, if necessary, backfill and teach those words. Tier 3 words, if we jump to the far right of the column, are uncommon words that are typically associated with a specific domain. In other words, these are content area words, words such as entomologist or peninsula, bucolic, revolution. So these are all words that are technical, that are specific to different content areas, and are critical for students learning new concepts. Tier 2 words in the middle are words that appear frequently in texts for which students might already have a conceptual understanding. These are words that are more complex, more advanced, or richer than the Tier 1 words, but they are not content specific. They're not subject matter words. So these are words like avoid, fortunate, adapt. Other words might be, instead of cold, it could be frigid. Another word for happy is elated. Those are all examples of Tier 2 words, the words that really show understanding and richness of vocabulary. And these are words that are ideal for instruction in language arts. There's a special subset of Tier 2 words, and those are the cross-disciplinary academic words. These are words that are used primarily in academic settings or academic texts and discourse, but are used across the discipline, so they're not discipline specific. Examples might be feature or illustrate contrast, strategy. So understanding these words would be really beneficial in understanding academic texts, whether it's in science, language arts, history, social studies, but these are words that are specific to academic content. I have a little passage here for you, and I'm going to give you a chance to take a look to see whether or not you can find Tier 3 words and Tier 2 words. So the first, we'll just read through the passage. Oh, bee, you look as lovely as a longhorn beetle lifting off her flight, and I must admit your antennae are adorable. Yes, you've metamorphosed into a splendid young lady. Bee rolled her eyes and muttered, My father, the entomologist. I heard that, Bee. It's not nice to mumble, unless you want to be called a mumblebee. Bee's father slapped his knee and hooted. Bee rolled her eyes a second time. The first day of 5th grade, and my father tells me I look like a longhorn beetle. Bee shuddered at the thought. She absolutely detested bugs. Why does it have to be obsessed with insects? She wondered. Why not football or golf like most fathers? The answer was simple. Bee's dad was weird. His weirdness made the whole family weird, and he made Bee the weirdest of all when he named her Bee Ursula Gentry. B-U-G. So let's take a look for Tier 3 words and then Tier 2 words. You'll recall that Tier 3 words are words that are disciplinary specific. So in this case, dealing with entomology or biology. And some examples of Tier 3 words in this passage include longhorn beetle, entomologist, antennae, and metamorphosed. These are words that really help you understand the passage, but you'll likely only come across those words in STEM settings, particularly in biology. You'll recall that Tier 2 words are more advanced than the basic everyday words that are in Tier 1, but unlike Tier 3 words, you'll find them across different subject matters and content areas. Some examples include adorable, muttered, mumble, shuddered, absolutely, obsessed, insects, and wondered. So those are just a few examples of Tier 2 words. You can see that adorable could be replaced with the Tier 1 word, cute. Absolutely can also be synonymous with totally. Detested, a Tier 1 word that's a synonym for detested, is hated. So you see that Tier 2 words could often be substituted with simpler words, but they do show richer, more advanced, subtle, nuanced, sophisticated understanding. Some examples of academic words include second, grade, absolutely, and wondered. Sometimes the academic words may overlap with Tier 1 words, sometimes with Tier 2 words, but these are all school-based types of words that you'll find in academic contexts. There are a number of steps involved in direct vocabulary instruction. The first step is providing a student-friendly description, explanation, or example of the new term or concept. In other words, when you introduce a new vocabulary word, the first thing is that you want to make sure that children have comprehensible input so they understand what that word is supposed to be. Another thing that could be done is presenting a non-linguistic representation. So that could be a picture illustrating that. The third step would be having students generate their own description of the explanation. Now that they've seen a picture, if relevant, and they've received a student-friendly definition, you want to make sure that they have some sort of understanding. So can they give their own explanation of the word's meaning? Next, you'll want students to engage in activities that can help them add to their knowledge of the terms in their long-term memory. The more deeply children process new vocabulary, the more that they use the new vocabulary items, the more likely it will be embedded in their long-term memory. Finally, you're going to want to have periodic review of vocabulary. Just because a child has mastered a word in 1 week doesn't mean that they'll retain it in the long run. So circling back to the vocabulary words and giving repeated opportunities to review and practice newly learned words can help embed that in their long-term memory. So you see that the first couple of steps involves introducing new terms and concepts. And the second set of steps 3 through 5, are all involved in reviewing and reinforcing the new words. In other words, it's not enough just to introduce the words and define them. You want children to have opportunities to practice them. The more exposures they have, the more opportunities they have to use new words, the more likely they will actually learn and retain those new vocabulary items. Student-friendly definitions basically involve two components. The first is to characterize how the word is used and what it means. So you explain the meaning in everyday language. Let's take an example. Let's take a look at how these student-friendly, child-friendly definitions can be applied. Let's take a look at the word butterfly. In the top portion, you see the typical dictionary definition of a butterfly. The first one, the most common one, is any of numerous diurnal insects of the order Lepidoptera, characterized by clubbed antennae, a slender body, and large, broad, often conspicuously marked wings. That definition is even more challenging and confusing than the word butterfly for a child. Let's take a look at the student dictionary from Merriam-Webster. A butterfly is any of numerous slender-bodied, day-flying insects with large, often brightly colored wings. Compare moth. So you can see that this is using child-friendly language. It's a lot more comprehensible. It's contrasting butterflies with moths, so you have an idea that they're daytime and they've got slender bodies, brightly colored wings. But the easiest way of defining butterflies in a student-friendly manner is to show them a picture. All right, so there you have it. Children need student-friendly definitions to be able to understand the new concepts. After they learn the new terms and the concepts, then they need lots of practice, reinforcing and reviewing the learned vocabulary. So there we have direct instruction. Another important component to vocabulary learning is giving children the skills so that they could learn independently. And one important way of doing so is fostering word consciousness. Let's take a look at word consciousness now. So what's word consciousness? Word consciousness is just developing that disposition, awareness, and interest in learning new words. Kids encounter new words all the time, especially when they're reading. What we hope is that children just don't kind of go for the context and not really pay attention. If they're not attending to the words and new words and trying to puzzle on them and figure out what they are, they're not going to build their vocabularies very much. Instead, we want them to be consciously mindful of the words that they encounter and become interested in learning their meanings. So when they come across new words while they're reading, watching videos, talking with people, they come across new words and then they become interested and say, oh, okay, that's a neat word. I think I'll remember that. There are a number of strategies that teachers and parents can use to help promote this word consciousness. In other words, becoming word conscious isn't just an innate disposition. It can be something that's learned. One way is through modeling. So parents, teachers, educators, what you can do is use rich language, pulling in many of the tier 2 words. Once you know that children understand the word sad, you might use other words such as disappointed, miserable, giving children the opportunity to be more colorful and see you using these richer and more nuanced words. Another strategy that preschool teachers and K-12 teachers can use is the word of the day. Having a new word each day puzzling over it, thinking, oh wow, this is really interesting. This is something that children can actually get very interested in. Another strategy for promoting word consciousness is encouraging wordplay. So those dad jokes that are full of puns are a fantastic way, even if you're groaning, to promote word consciousness. Using rhymes and limericks, playing with oxymorons like sweet and sour, it was a hot cold shower, playing with alliteration. So any of the ways that you could play with language, play with the words, play with their either sounds and phonology, or playing with their multiple meanings are all ways of encouraging word awareness and word consciousness. A third strategy is for drawing attention to idioms, cliches, and puns. So we have the use of non-literal language, such as idioms and cliches, as well as puns that play upon polysemy, or the multiple meanings of words. This could involve exploring idioms, drawing idioms, so drawing the literal meaning of what these idioms might be. Idioms could be kick the bucket, which the literal meaning would be a picture of someone kicking a bucket, while the figurative meaning would be someone dying. Another strategy could have kids download pictures or ads from magazines into class so that real puns can be talked about class. You could have children go on a pun hunt and find the best memes with the worst puns. If teachers want to find some idioms that can be really useful, then the Reading Teacher's Book of List. The Reading Teacher is a journal from the International Literacy Association, and they publish an annual book called the Reading Teacher's Book of Lists. And one of the lists they have are for idioms. Or you could go to the website, www.idiomsite.com, and you'll be able to find all kinds of fun idioms that you could use. Another strategy teachers use, especially in the primary grades, are word walls. Word walls are fantastic tools for developing word awareness, in which you post interesting words on the wall. These can be organized alphabetically. The example you see on this slide could actually be more for helping children learn sight words and words that they might be interested in, as well as drawing in their own interests, such as themselves. So a word wall technically is just a wall in the classroom that has all the vocabulary words readily visible to all children. You can see them in content area classes, where they're organized thematically based on the words on that subject. They can be used for poetry units to inspire and encourage children to incorporate these words into their writing. So word walls are tools of making kids more conscious of words and drawing their attention to specific words. The final strategy that the readings talk about is structural analysis, or looking at the morphological structures of words. By late elementary school, so we're talking about 4th, 5th, 6th grades, about 60% of the words that children encounter are morphologically complex. That is, they have more than one morpheme in them, and they often include derivational affixes, not just the inflectional endings like the S to mark plural or the ED or ING to mark tense. So with structural analysis, children are taught to recognize and isolate prefixes and suffixes. Children are also explicitly taught the steps to analyze a word. So they're taught to look for the prefixes, look for the suffixes, try and remember what the different prefixes mean or the suffixes mean, think about the root, and think about how they come together. So when children are first introduced to structural analysis, teachers typically pull together a group of words, based on a particular prefix or suffix to help them learn and generalize that principle. So the initial instruction may not involve the context of a passage or a story, but instead just focusing on the words in and of themselves. Children would then be asked to try and guess or infer the meanings of words based on the parts. So they're given opportunities to practice what they think the parts of the words, the different morphemes, mean and how they contribute to the word meaning as a whole. Teachers should provide students with guided practice during reading. So after they've had practice doing structural analysis in isolation, one of the things that children struggle with is transferring what they learn to do when words are on their own. So the structural analysis with words in isolation, they might become quite good at, but then when they're reading a passage, they get overwhelmed and they forget to transfer it. That's where providing guided practice comes in. That enables students to notice and analyze complex words while they're reading texts and not have it be this random exercise that they do in class. Teachers typically start incorporating structural analysis in third grade, and they'll typically use prefixes such as re, as in to do something once again, or un, to present negation, and they might use the inflectional endings and start using more common suffixes such as the ly to create adverbs. Thank you so much for listening to the video, and I look forward to seeing you in person once again this upcoming Wednesday.